My name is Talia. I always feel a little strange saying it out loud, as if the moment the word leaves my mouth, the past I've tried so hard to bury rises through the cracks and sits beside me. I'm speaking to you now from New Orleans, the city of ghosts, music, and people who disappear without ever leaving. But my story didn't start here. It started long before, in a place I no longer call home. Inside a house where love was supposed to live but never really did. I grew up in a family that looked normal from the outside. Small house, small yard, small dreams, but inside those walls, nothing felt safe. My father's anger was the kind that lived beneath his skin, quiet, waiting, explosive. My mother floated through life like she was someone else's shadow. Numb from the pills she took to survive another day with him, I learned very early that silence was protection. If I made myself invisible, maybe the fights would skip over me. Maybe the chaos would choose someone else. But chaos always finds the ones who are weakest. I was 12 the first time I realized I didn't matter in that house. I came home from school and found the front door wide open, lights off, dinner half cooked on the stove. They were gone. No note, no explanation. Just gone. They came back hours later like nothing had happened. That was the night something inside me cracked. A thin fracture I didn't fully feel until years later. As a teenager, I started drifting toward anyone who could make me feel something. Friends, boys, strangers. I was hungry for affection, for attention, for the slightest sign that I wasn't invisible. But every connection I made ended the same way. I gave too much, they took everything, and I returned home emptier than before. Eventually, I figured maybe emptiness was my destiny. When I turned 16, things got worse. I was hanging out with older kids, skipping school, doing anything to stay away from home. One night, I ended up at a party I shouldn't have been at. There was alcohol, drugs, people twice my age. I remember music pounding through my body, lights blurring into ribbons, the world spinning while someone whispered in my ear that I was special, that I was pretty, that I could be something. It was the first time I felt seen. It was also the first night I lost control of my own life. From that moment forward, I was falling, fast, hard, without a parachute. By 17, I had run away, packed a backpack, some clothes, a cheap phone, and took a bus south because I wanted to find a place where the noise inside me could blend into the noise outside. New Orleans felt like the right kind of chaos, a city where broken people don't stand out, where no one asks why you flinch at sudden movements, where everyone is running from something. I thought maybe I could disappear here. Instead, I transformed. My first months were rough. I slept on couches, in spare rooms, sometimes in laundromats that stayed open all night. I worked small jobs, waitressing, washing dishes, handing out flyers on Bourbon Street, but money was never enough. I was always one missed shift away from losing everything. And in a place like this, people notice when you're desperate. I remember the night the strip club found me, or maybe I found it. I was outside in the rain, waiting for a bus that never came, soaked, shivering, angry at myself for thinking I could survive alone. A woman walked up to me, older, confident, the kind of person who knows exactly who she is and what she wants. She handed me a card and said, "You're wasting your beauty out here, sweetheart. Come by tomorrow. I'll show you how to use it." I didn't trust her, but I trusted hunger even less. The next day, I walked into the club, neon lights humming, perfume mixed with cigarette smoke, music vibrating through the floor. It felt like walking into another universe, one where names didn't matter, pasts didn't exist, and pain could be turned into profit if you learned how to package it right. I told myself I would try it just once, just to make rent, just to get through the week. One night became 1 month, 1 month became years, and that is how my life began to divide itself, before the club and after it. In the beginning, I believed I was in control. I thought I could dance, make money, go home, and keep the darkness outside. But the club has a way of reshaping you, slowly, quietly, until one day you wake up and realize you're no longer performing, you're surviving. Men touched me, admired me, judged me, paid me. I learned to smile when I wanted to scream, to flirt when I wanted to run, to pretend I was powerful even when I felt like a puppet. But I wasn't powerless, not entirely, because in that world, every woman learns to build armor, thin, glittering, invisible armor. Mine wasn't strong yet, but it was growing. I didn't know then just how much more I would need it. People often think the club is just a place where men come to forget their lives and women come to make quick money, but that's only the surface. Underneath the lights, beneath the music and the perfume, There is an entire education happening, one no school or parent ever prepared me for. I didn't know it at the time, but every night on that stage, every conversation in the dark corners, every bill slipped into my hand was teaching me something about people, about survival, and about myself. None of the lessons were gentle. The first thing I learned was that desire is rarely about beauty. It's about vulnerabilities and theirs. Men didn't come to me because I was glamorous. They came because I listened, because I laughed at their jokes, because I touched their arm in a way that made them feel alive again. Sometimes I'd look at a man and know exactly what he wanted before he said a word. Some wanted to be worshipped, some wanted to confess, some just wanted to sit beside someone who wouldn't walk away. Understanding that changed everything. It made me realize how lonely people really are, even the ones pretending to be powerful. The second lesson was darker. Affection and money are always entangled in that world. Lines blur quickly. The club trains you to perform intimacy, to sell a fantasy that feels real enough to be addictive. And once you learn to fake it, it becomes harder to know when anything is genuine. There were nights I'd leave work with wads of cash stuffed in my bag and still feel like I had nothing. I'd lie on my bed, staring at the ceiling, asking myself if anyone in this world would ever want me without paying for it. That question haunted me more than anything else. There were women who took to the job easily, almost naturally. They moved like water, like light, like they'd been made for the stage. I admired them, envied them, studied them, but I wasn't like that. Everything I did was learned, practiced, deliberate. I built my persona piece by piece, my walk, my smile, my voice, and even though it wasn't real, after a while it started to feel like the only version of me that people could ever accept. One night, an older dancer named Marlene pulled me aside. She had been in the business for years, long enough to see girls come and go, rise and fall, break and rebuild. "Don't ever forget who you were before this place," she told me, while she fixed her eyeliner in the mirror. "The club is a beast. Feed it, but don't let it eat you." I laughed like her words were dramatic, but deep down, I felt the truth of them. The club didn't just take pieces of your time, it took pieces of your soul. I promised myself I'd be different, that I'd keep a part of me untouched. I didn't realize how hard that would be. As months passed, I began to lose my sense of time. Nights bled into mornings, mornings into afternoons. I'd wake up at 3 p.m., drink coffee that tasted like burnt sugar, and walk to work with music hummed under my breath to drown out the exhaustion. The city around me pulsed with heat, humidity, and danger. New Orleans has a rhythm, slow, heavy, seductive, and the club matched it perfectly. When you step inside, the outside world dissolves. You forget bills, memories, mistakes. All that matters is the next dance, the next drink, the next man walking through the door. I also learned how quickly the wrong people attach themselves to you. Men who fall in love with the idea of you. Men who confuse your performance for devotion. Men who think money entitles them to your life. I had stalkers, jealous regulars, possessive strangers. I pretended it didn't scare me, but it did. Every woman at the club knew what it felt like to walk to her car clutching her keys between her fingers like a weapon, her heart racing, praying no one followed. In that world, attention is currency, but it's also a threat. Despite everything, I sometimes found small moments of connection in that chaos. A woman in the dressing room sharing her lipstick, a bartender who always saved me a bottle of water, a bouncer who walked me to my car without being asked. These small kindnesses became a kind of family, fragile but real. We were all broken in our own ways, but we protected each other as best we could. Still, the danger was always there, and eventually, the nights started to weigh on me. I'd leave the club after a long shift feeling like someone had scooped out the inside of my chest. I didn't realize it then, but I was slowly unraveling. I was drinking more, sleeping less, drifting into a version of myself I barely recognized. The money was good, sometimes incredible, but each dollar felt like it came with an invisible cost. The biggest lesson the club taught me was this: when you live in darkness long enough, your eyes adjust. You start to mistake the shadows for home. You start to think you belong in the place that is slowly destroying you. I didn't know it yet, but something was coming, an event, a loss, a night I still can't forget that would force me to confront everything I had been running from. And once that happened, there would be no going back. If I had to describe what the club taught me, I wouldn't start with money or men. I'd start with mirrors, because before you ever learn how to dance, how to flirt, how to survive, You learn how to look at yourself without flinching. In the beginning, that was the hardest part. I would stand backstage under the bright white bulbs, staring at a reflection that felt like a stranger. Makeup too heavy, lashes too dramatic, hair forced into waves I never wore in real life. It was me, but it wasn't me. It was the woman I had to become to make it through the night. Little by little, that mirror started teaching me something. Not confidence, no. That came later. What it taught me was discipline, performance, the art of stepping into a version of myself that men would pay to be near. Once I understood that, everything changed. The club has its own rules, whispered but never written. The first is, never let them see the real you. The second is, never forget the real you exists. I didn't understand the balance at first. I overcompensated, too friendly, too trusting, too eager. Men sensed that. The wrong ones always do. One man in particular, a regular, attached himself to me early on. He tipped well, drank too much, talked about his failing marriage, told me I was the only bright thing in his life. I didn't know then that words like that weren't compliments, they were warnings. He followed me to my car one night, insisting he drive me home because a delicate girl shouldn't be alone. I remember gripping my keys between my fingers, heart pounding, pretending to smile while every instinct screamed danger. I managed to shake him off with a lie about meeting my boyfriend, but that night I learned something crucial. Men project their fantasies onto you, but some believe those fantasies belong to them. I also learned that women in the club are sharper, smarter, and stronger than anyone gives them credit for. The dressing room was like a war room full of laughter, tears, gossip, warnings, alliances. We traded survival strategies the way others traded recipes. How to spot a drunk who might get violent. How to identify a man who pretends to be rich but tips like he's broke. How to tell the difference between a harmless obsession and a dangerous one. The women who had been dancing for years carried themselves like generals. They could read a room instantly, adjust their energy on command, and cut down any man who stepped over the line with a single, icy glance. One dancer, Celine, became something like an older sister to me. She had a scar on her ribs from a knife fight she never talked about, and eyes that looked decades older than her face. One night, she found me crying in the bathroom after a man said something cruel, something I pretended didn't bother me until it did. She sat beside me, took a drag of her cigarette, and said, "Baby, you're selling illusion. Don't let their words become your truth." I didn't fully understand what she meant until much later. Another lesson. Pain pays well. Not your pain exactly, but the illusion that you can be whatever someone wants you to be. If a man wanted innocence, I gave him sweetness. If he wanted danger, I became a storm. If he wanted to confess his sins, I became a confessional. It was a strange kind of acting, unscripted, unpredictable, emotionally expensive. Some people assume the club destroys your ability to love, as if taking your clothes off for money means you can't give your heart to anyone. But that's not true. If anything, it makes you crave love more intensely. You start searching for softness in a world built on sharp edges. That's why, when someone finally showed me kindness, real kindness, not the bought kind, I clung to it like a life raft. His name doesn't matter now. What matters is how he made me feel in a life where everything felt temporary. He wasn't a customer. He wasn't part of the club. He worked at a restaurant down the street, and we used to cross paths when I grabbed food during my breaks. At first it was small things, an extra packet of sauce, a smile that wasn't leering, a joke that didn't have an agenda. One night, after the club closed, he found me sitting outside on the curb, too exhausted to pretend anymore. He sat down beside me without asking, and handed me a warm pastry he had saved. No expectations, no hidden intentions, just a simple act of care. That night, something softened in me, and softness is dangerous when you've built your life around being hard. We fell into something that wasn't quite a relationship but felt like one. He saw me without the lashes, the glitter, the stage persona. He saw the girl who was tired of pretending. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But I was still working at the club, still surrounded by men, still absorbing their attention, their desires, their projections, that created a tension I didn't know how to handle. I tried to separate the two worlds, him in the daylight, the club at night, but emotions don't care about schedules. He began to struggle with jealousy, and I began to struggle with guilt. He'd ask me, "Does it ever bother you? The way they look at you?" I never knew how to answer honestly. The attention didn't bother me, it numbed me. What bothered me was how it affected him. He wanted a version of me, untouched by the life I lived, but that version no longer existed. I had been shaped by the club, molded by it, scarred by it, and deep down, I think he loved the idea of rescuing me more than he loved the reality of who I was. Everything unraveled the night he waited outside the club for me. I didn't know he was there. He saw me walking out with a customer I had spent most of the night talking to. I used to believe fear was something to run from, something that lived in dark alleys, violent memories, men with cold hands or cruel eyes. But over time, I learned that fear can also live quietly inside you, breathing with you, growing with you, guiding your choices in ways you don't even notice. The night everything fell apart, the night I realized how fragile my life truly was, fear became the thing that finally forced me to change. After the incident outside the club, after the shouting, the jealousy, the man I cared for storming off into the night, I felt something inside me collapse. Not the dramatic kind of collapse you see in movies, but the silent one, the kind where you sit on the edge of your bed at 5 a.m., still in your work clothes, staring at the wall and whispering, "How did I get here?" It was like waking up from a long sleep inside a life I didn't recognize, a life that wasn't built on purpose, but on survival and habit. The days that followed were heavy. I worked my shifts like a ghost, moving through the club with mechanical precision. Customers talked and laughed, but their voices sounded far away. Music blasted, lights flashed, but nothing reached me. Even the other dancers noticed. Celine pulled me aside one night and asked if I was going soft, her voice rough but worried. I didn't know how to explain that it wasn't softness, it was emptiness, a deep, echoing emptiness I had been ignoring for years. Late one evening, after closing, I walked alone through the quarter, past bars spilling out drunken tourists, past street musicians playing melodies that hung in the humid air like smoke. I ended up by the river. The Mississippi at night looks like a black ribbon swallowing the moonlight. I stood there for a long time, listening to the water hit the stone, feeling the city pulse behind me. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who wanted a simple life, a safe home, a chance to grow into something steady and peaceful. I mourned her like she was someone I had lost years ago. But then, something unexpected happened. I realized I wasn't mourning her. I was ready to become her again. The truth is, I had been running on survival mode for so long that I forgot healing was even an option. I forgot I was allowed to stop, to breathe, to choose a different path. That night by the river, I made a promise to myself, not a dramatic vow, just a quiet, determined truth. I didn't want to die in the same darkness that raised me. Leaving the club wasn't easy. Nothing in my life ever was. I took fewer shifts at first, then I stopped altogether. The manager tried to convince me to stay, told me I had potential, that I was one of the top earners, that girls like me couldn't just walk away. Maybe he was right, maybe most of us don't. But I did. Not because I was brave, but because I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of performing. Tired of living in a world where I had to be someone else to survive. I found a small job at a cafe. Nothing glamorous, just pouring coffee, wiping counters, chatting with strangers who didn't want anything from me. It was shockingly peaceful, slow, ordinary. Ordinary was exactly what I needed. I saved what I could, rented a tiny room in a house that smelled like old wood and jasmine, and began rebuilding myself piece by piece. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in fragments. In morning sunlight. In quiet rooms. In the first night I slept without nightmares. In the first day I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. People think strength is loud, fighting, forcing your way through life, but real strength is quieter. It's choosing to keep going even when every part of you wants to disappear. It's forgiving yourself for the things you did to survive. It's looking in the mirror and seeing someone worth saving. I still carry fear with me, not the fear of men, or the club, or my past, but the fear of falling back into old patterns, the fear